Welcome. I am so honored to be joined by three outstanding Black elected officials who come from the ranks of our union of a better way to closing of History Month by celebrating three incredible leaders who are bringing the voices of Black and multiracial working people to elected off in three states across the country. Today, we're going to honor Black history by celebrating the present leadership and their vision for the future. And I see this celebration as challenging what the right wing in this country is trying to do. How dare they try and silence the voices of working people and voters? How dare they try and limit American history by saying in Florida that Black history cannot be a part of American history? How dare they allow corporations to continue to resist workers' rights to organize in this country? How dare they try and limit the reproductive freedom of people in every state in the union? But we have elected officials on this panel today that are fighting back with us. I'm honored to be joined by the Honorable William McCurdy II, who is a commissioner in Clark County, Nevada. Illinois State Representative Lakeisha Collins, who is from the 9th District in Illinois, and Assemblyman Reggie Jones Sawyer from California's Assembly District 57. We're going to do questions and answers and begin a conversation together. And I'm going to begin with the Honorable Lakeisha Collins, who is a member of the Illinois House of Representatives. Lakeisha is a lifelong Chicagoan, a mother of three, and an organizer. And I first got to meet Lakeisha when she was a certified nursing assistant in where she became a leader in the nursing home fight in Chicago. And she has brought that leadership into the Illinois legislature. She is now the chair of the Illinois Black Caucus and a whip, a leader in the House Democratic Caucus. That's right, William. That's a big deal. So with that, Lakeisha, I want to begin the first question by asking you, how did your leadership contribute to your role as an elected official and your rise to elected office?
Thank you so much, President Mary Kay. It's always an honor to be in your presence and also joining with, two other great members. And so I started off, as a member working in a nursing home and seeing the injustice that the workers and our seniors were facing. And at that time, I was a young mom. Facing a lot of barriers when it came to childcare, housing, and just all of my, lived experiences that I had brought with me to my union. And then just having someone to believe in me as a worker, but also as a union member, and giving me the skills I needed to organize my colleagues and fighting back against the nursing home industry. And that was through learning politics, learning how to get legislation passed, reforming nursing homes, and then taking it a step further. It was the actions and the rallies that I joined alongside with our other allies here in Chicago, and even the movement for Fight for 15. I remember going to New York. I would have never had that opportunity had it not been for my union or my mentors who invested in me. But going to New York and bringing that blueprint back to Chicago and really sparking that fight across our country, the need for working class people to make more than poverty wages. And I mean, I've been a part of so many different fights, and I owe that all to my union because they opened up so many doors for me. I think that people, on the outside looking in, they think that we're just members paying dues, but they don't understand that we are part ownership of our organizations, and that it is through those opportunities that we're able to not only gain different experiences across the different states that we represent, but also set us up for positions like this, right? Getting us prepared to take on these challenges. And so it was through the skills, the training, the motivational speeches, being just in room with giants who have been through these fights before me. And then my union giving me the opportunity to have a voice. And I think that the Future Fighters, which I was the president of our Young Workers Organization, really set me up to not only get rid of my fears of running for office, but prepared me to look at a lens through a working class person's experience and having that voice in Springfield. And so I think all of those factors play into how I got here and why I owe so much back to the labor movement.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lakeisha. What a powerful answer, to this question of what moved you. I'm really interested in how you convey to your caucus members in the Illinois legislature about the way in which your leadership was empowered in the way you just described through the union.
Yes. So I want to say when I first got to the General Assembly, it wasn't a walk in the park, right? I think I've had the
Tell the
experience of
truth,
being.
sister. Tell the
Oh,
truth.
I'm going to tell the truth. Anybody who knows me knows that's me. Being on the outside and just advocating on behalf for this important legislation and teaching our legislators, our issues and why it's so important to vote for them, is a little bit different from being in the chamber. And so when I tell you there are barriers, there are barriers. You have to be someone who can not only have tough skin, which I have that, but also be true to what you campaigned on, be true and authentic. And that's something that my mentor, Shaba Andrich, always taught me. And he always told me that it is you being authentic and you just telling it like it is that's going to take you a long way. And so I think building those relationships with my colleagues, having boundaries, being upfront about who I am, where I stand on the issue, and then telling them my story. I think storytelling is something that is unique with our movement because when you tell your story, people are able to connect to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of separated me from a lot of people. I'm a former youth and care. And so what happens in child welfare is important. And that's why I'm one of the biggest advocates on behalf of it because I bring something different to the table.
Right.
And so now everyone who has been fighting around DCFS and reforming the system, um, it's a little bit more of a spark because I'm there, because I can tell you
Right.
from my experience
Right.
of a young person who had to navigate through that system that simply just was not working for me 20 something years ago and still isn't really working today, but there are improvements that are being made and there's a long way to go. And then also from a nursing home worker experience and just being able to explain the ghost schedules, the understaff, being understaffed all the time, just the wear and tear on your body as a nursing home worker, and being able to pass the Medicare bed tax that we've been trying to pass for 10 years. We finally got it passed, right?
Yes, you
And
did.
holding people accountable for
Yeah.
taking money from these special interest groups who literally are harming our community. And so just being there to remind them that, hey, remember you said this when you stood in front of our members and said that you were going to be a champion on this situation, this issue and this issue. I need you to do that now because I'm here and I'm still fighting as if I'm still in my union because I'm always going to be a part of SEIU, right? And then and I'll say it again, it sound like a broken record, but having those lived experiences, being a working class person, and looking at it through a lens of and I have so many layers to me. I think that's what makes me different. I think that is what led me into the role that I am in today. And I think that I just bring a different energy and vibe into the General Assembly. I
Yeah.
haven't changed
Yeah.
because of the
So,
title.
so proud.
I'm still the
So
same
proud of
person.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lakeisha, for walking through any doubt or fear and representing all of us in the Illinois State Legislature. You touched on challenges, and I want to go to our brother Assemblyman Reggie Jones Sawyer and ask you, Reggie, about how you brought the experience from Local 7 to 1 in Southern California into the state legislature in California. I know you've been a huge advocate in so many areas, higher education, immigrant, expanding healthcare. Tell us how you met those challenges.
And thank you. And it's good to be, I'm honored to be with my other two presenters, and also always good to see you, President Henry, because you're my president. Um, I'm a retired SEIU 721 member. And so they're still taking dues out of my check. Let's remember that. Um, it really kind of began when I was a baby. My uncle was one of the Little Rock Nine, one of the 9 kids that integrated Central High School in 1957. Those 15 and 16-year-olds, 9 of them were beaten, they were kicked, they were spit on, they thought the N-word was their middle name. They went through a whole lot of things that me as an adult, I don't know if I could have gone through that for a year. They had to bring the 101st Airborne to protect them. And because of their struggle to get into high school, think about what I said. They were trying to get the best education in Little Rock, Arkansas. They're trying to get into an all-white high school, and they were barred from that by the governor. And it's because of those experiences that those individuals, my uncle in particular, Jefferson Thomas, as those stories that they told me about that struggle, that when I went to school, and I went to a fancy school, and I started having a really good time. A really, really good time. That kind of time where you're on academic probation, about to get kicked out of school. And I had to sit on the throne of my grandmother, who had a ladle in her hand. If it was in the left hand, she wanted to talk. Right hand, the talking ended and the beatings began. And she told me that when I was a baby, during that time, the Klan called her and said, "Get your son out of school or your grandson will never make it to school." She switched to the right hand with that ladle and said, "And that grandson was you. And you have absolutely no right to give away that fancy education, because his family sacrificed everything so that you could go to any school you wanted." So I know I stand on shoulders of giants. I know every day that I'm not only in the assembly, but every day I walk in this society, I've got to give back. And so when I retired from the city of LA, not only as an SEIU member, vice president of SEIU 721, the managers union, I get to the assembly and I realize there are a lot of people that don't really know what it's like to be a public sector union member. It's a little bit different. And there were people talking about taking away our benefits that we worked hard for. When I came out of USC making $25,000, my counterparts were making 80 to 100, and they were laughing at me. But I wanted to give back in service. And so they wanted to take away all the retirement and benefits that we had fought hard for, that we fought on the picket line for to get. Because we're doing service. When you're a public sector employee, you don't get paid what your private sector counterparts. I did a $260 million real estate deal because I was director of real estate. I just got paid my regular civil service salary. If I was in the private sector, I would get 2%, 3% of that, and I wouldn't be on this call right now. I'd be on a beach in Hawaii somewhere. But I did it because we wanted to build a new police station. We wanted to build more fire stations. That's why I did all of that, because I wanted to get back to the people. And so when I'm in the assembly and contracts come up and my Republican counterparts talk about, that private sector and public sector people should not get the benefits that they have, I have to translate for them the sacrifices that our union brothers and sisters make so that they can make sure they provide the services. Think about it. We provide services that most people don't want to do, or most people aren't doing. If it wasn't for us, that lower bottom echelon of society might fall through the cracks. We are the true backbone. SEIU is the true backbone of this country. And so I call myself a labor whisperer. I try to explain to my Republican colleagues about that, especially when we went through the dark ages. you know, that time is called the Trump ages. When we went through that time when that kind of conservatism was sweeping across the nation toward the West, well, I was proud to say that when it got to the borders of California, it stopped. We just stopped it in its track, and then we made sure we held tight until the rest of the country caught on, and we got someone in the office that understood our pain, that understood what we went through, that, but most important, understand what we do for this country, because that's the most important. And a lot of times, people on the other side of the aisle want to discount all of that.
Reggie, thank you so much for talking about the shoulders that we all stand on. And especially, I just want to honor your family member from the Little Rock Nine. What an incredible way to celebrate Black history. And Sheena Rice Patton saying to us in the chat, labor whisperer. I love that. I have the same reaction. I also just want to salute on behalf of all of us how you've played a key role in the California legislature in extending benefits to immigrants in California, and tell us whether that's a difficult road to hoe on making sure driver's license were available and higher education, I think you made accessible for immigrants. That's another way you beat back the attack that Trump was waging on immigrant families in this country.
And that's what I love about being in SEIU. We care about everybody. We treat everybody the same. My district is over 80% Latino. I represent Latinos. And I make sure I represent my constituency because it's the right thing to do. It's not about, it's not about votes or anything. It's about doing the work for your constituents. And because of that, they've reelected me 5 times. I'm in my last 2 years in the assembly. I've been in there for 10 years, and they brought me back every year because we run every 2 years. And I like to believe it's a testament to the fact that I'm taking care of everyone, even the African Americans in my district, Latinos, and in my district, that everybody feels that when I'm there, they see themselves in me. And that's the most important thing as an elected official, that your constituents, when they talk about you, I mean, my nickname is T.O. Reggie. And so that is probably one of the proudest titles I've ever gotten as a assemblyman. But Theo Reggie, that says it all to me.
Place of honor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Reggie. Now let's round this out before we open up for a discussion amongst us by Commissioner William McCurdy II, the Honorable. I was so proud to work alongside William when he was political director at SEIU Nevada, and he has an incredible history. He was the first African-American elected as the youngest state Democratic Party, and he's introduced legislation to improve education, public safety, healthcare, and economic development. And William, I was hoping you could focus for us on the role elected officials can play in expanding the ability of workers being able to join together in unions, because I know you've been a fierce advocate for making sure that every worker, no matter what job they do, has the right to join together in a union. Welcome.
Well, thank you, President Henry. Sincerely grateful to be on with, my colleagues from across the nation who have been on the front lines advocating for workers' rights, wages, and what it sounds like so many other things. But the first and foremost responsibility that we have as legislators and policymakers is to understand the needs of those within our respective communities. And that starts with having meetings early and having them often with the specific focus and outcome of those meetings being policy proposals. I found that before my time being in office that many people would have conversations, but during those conversations, there wouldn't be any policy asked to go at the end of those conversations. So with starting early and often with those meetings as elected officials, we have a responsibility to move really quickly once we get into, you know, those areas and arenas of being able to move that policy, whether you're in the legislature and you're dealing with statewide issues, or you're like me at the county level dealing with county issues. But the absolute first thing that we have to do when we get in these offices is look at the access within the collective bargaining agreements that we have, because without access within the language, then we can't expand upon the opportunity for everyone to be a part of the union and make our union stronger, which is going to be the vehicle in which, you know, the policy proposals are offered up for us to consider as policymakers. But being that I had an opportunity to not only, you know, be the political director, but more importantly, an organizer, I got firsthand knowledge on what we needed the elected officials to do during that time when I was just an organizer who was on the front lines doing the work. But after we get there, we have a responsibility to continue holding meetings. We have a responsibility to continue organizing in our own right as policymakers, because we are the ones who are able to articulate how the policy is going to benefit our constituency. And any investment that we make into the worker, we're essentially making that investment into the economy, because, like was stated by my colleague in California, we are the spine and that makes the body stand upright, and we are the brain that tells the body what it wants us to do. With SEIU being so essential in the work that we do, so that is our role. We are the front line as elected officials, but we are the ones who are able to be the quarterback, if you will, that shows the workers how they can expand upon their union and how they can take back power from those who don't really want to have them, you know, cede that power.
Thank you so much for laying it out so clearly, William. Now I'm interested in asking each one of you, what advice would you give to Black leaders that want to step through their fear and run for office, and to any union member who wants to pursue the path that you've all taken? Lakeisha, you want to kick us off?
I'll jump in at one time.
I was looking at
I was gonna go, but
the assemblyman. Y'all want to go? Well, I would say, you know, you just have to face your fear. I was afraid too, right? When I was asked to run, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I don't have a college degree. And, you know, my sister, who is phenomenal, Erica Bland, said back to me, you don't need a college degree to run for office. But that was one of my fears. I used to look at politicians as people who were married, had college degrees, and I felt like I wouldn't fit in. But she said, you're the right choice. And I was the right choice. I am, right? And so not being married, not having a college degree, but just having the lived experience of a single mom, living, you know, off minimum wage, looking at eviction notices left and right because, you know, the rent is so high. I'm trying to keep from cursing. The rent is so high in the city of Chicago. It's just hard for working people to live, right? Or, you know, just being tired of trying to survive in a society that says that, oh, there's opportunities everywhere, but unfortunately, workers are constantly denied that access to those opportunities. And so I would say face your fears. Don't have any doubts. Make sure that you have, you know, the support that's needed around you. My campaign was ran with my union backing me 1,000%, and community and organizations who believed in my vision for the 9th district. That's who won, you know, grassroots organizations, people, working day people. That's who won this campaign. And I would say just be honest about who you are. Be yourself. I wore jeans and a t-shirt every single day. I knocked every door. I had people telling me all the time to sit down, you know, take a break, and I couldn't. I couldn't take a break because everything depended on it. I wanted to revive this district. I wanted to balance it out. My district is, you know, is very diverse, has a whole lot to offer, but I represent one of the communities where Martin Luther King lived before he died, before he was murdered, North Lawndale. a community that has so many possibilities in this. It's a community of strong-willed people who have a lot of history, but they deserve so much more. And so, I
That's
put
right.
my all into this race.
That's right.
And even the second time, running unopposed, I still put my all into it. That's why I knock every day. Well, as much as I can when I'm in session too. I go and I still knock on the doors, but that's the organizer in me. And that's the difference from union members running against the machine, that we bring a different set of skills and a different meaning to what it means to engage with government. I'm teaching people the process of what a state representative does, how to pass a bill, whatever decisions I'm making people a part of it. I have conversations with people like I'm still an organizer, talking to my union members about organizing a strike, right? I sit on the phone sometimes late at night talking to my constituents. Even if they call me to vent about something, I just answer my phone. I don't know it's the organizer in me, but I would tell them to just run your race, and remember that you have people behind you who are about this, who care about uplifting our communities. And you got it. You got the support. You just have to see it in yourself and unleash your power. It's there. You're part of one of the strongest unions in the nation. Is there. So
that's great, Lakeisha. There's lots of love in the chat. I hope you get to look at it for people.
I don't see it, but I do it.
Encouraged by you. Thank you so much. Reggie, what about you? What advice would you give folks that want to think about taking the leap that you three did?
So I would tell them that your start is this SEIU union. It's probably the best backing you can possibly get if you want to make a run. I ran. The first time I ran, I had to drop out because I was going through a really bad divorce and I wanted to raise my son. Well, 10 years later, he graduated from college and he's now a teacher. So I know I did the right thing by dropping out of a campaign. SEIU still stuck with me when I ran again 8 years later. I lost that election and I was really depressed. But 2 years later, SEIU picked me up, propped me up and said, let's do this one more time. And I just remember my president, Bob Schoonover, said, we're going to spend everything we have to. We're going to have everybody out there on the line. We're going to get you over the hump this time. I don't think most people realize how important it is to have union backing to be able to make this happen. Mm-hmm. So don't ever, ever leave that behind, and don't ever underestimate the power of your union, especially SEIU, to get you over, and even get you over your fears. And I won overwhelmingly because of them.
Yes.
And then the last thing I would tell you is understand this is a business. When you run for office, it is a business. You got to raise the money. You got to call people for endorsements. You got to call people for money. You got to walk those precincts. You got to get your message together. You got to hire a whole campaign team. And even after you get elected, we're all CEOs of our own little business. And we've got staff that got to go out there and take care of constituents. So once you step up, understand you're now becoming almost like a business person that helps the public. And once you are able to do that and you're successfully able to walk through that, it's so much easier when you know what you're getting yourself into. So I recommend it I wish everyone would run for office, because you're not going to know what it's like to run for office until you run for office. Yeah. And the last thing I will leave you with is I was afraid of a lot of different things in office. But once I got there, I realized being in a local union president race where people are arguing and fighting on the floor is much harder than being in the assembly right now. It is.
Good training, that internal union debate.
One of the best in the world.
That's great. Thank you so much, Reggie. The Honorable William, bring it home for us on your advice to folks.
All right. The first thing I can say, and thank you, President Henry, again for this opportunity to be with you and my colleagues from across the country. The first thing that you have to do is you have to familiarize yourself with the role. Oftentimes you have people that get into elected office because it looks sexy, but they're looking at the fruit as opposed to looking at the root or the soil that the seed was grown in. And for me, what that meant was, understanding the issues that many of my neighbors and my friends and family members were experiencing. And ironically, the entity that aligned closest with what my family was experiencing was SEIU, which is why I devoted my life to it for a period of time. And still now that I'm elected, because those who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. So like my colleague from from Illinois, she said that she didn't have a she didn't have a college degree, but I was a high school dropout, a teenage father at 16 years old, and I didn't get my college degree till I was 24 years old. I didn't get my high school diploma till I was 24 years old. Then I went to college. But people will want to take something like that and turn it against you, but they want to deal with the child and the childish behavior, but they don't want to deal with the adult that's overcome and struggled through so much to get to where they are. So you have to get used to the art of storytelling. You be the one to define yourself. You be the one to tell people about what you've experienced, because 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, they have experienced it themselves, or they have someone that they know who have also went through those experiences, which makes you more personable, which makes you more electable, which makes you the person that's going to be the right foot to make change, because you have a real life connection to the issues and the policies that need to be passed on behalf of the people. And that is how I did it. And more than that, it was also because I had the backing of a union who represented the issues that everyone across the nation and even outside of these borders can relate to. There is no, this new war is war against poverty, war against people who are already going through. And it's expensive to be in poverty, by the way. So it's our responsibility as elected officials who've essentially come from those seeds that were planted in that soil and are now looking to be, someone who has made it. It's our responsibility to carry those policies forward because we know what needs to be passed. It's our job also to be a negotiator in the hallways and the offices of power with colleagues who may not have those shared experiences. So don't doubt yourself. You have everything that you need right now to make that change, but you cannot make change until you have prepared yourself to understand how you're going to get it done. And that's where that, that organizing comes from, but you already have it in you. You just have to make sure that you don't get caught slipping without knowing the correct information to move policy on behalf of the people, because this is a very serious role. And this is not for someone who just wants a title. This is for someone who wants to work. And work is how you're going to make progress. And if you work, you're going to get people to believe and push you forward.
But if I can chime in on that, I would piggyback because there's no blueprint to how to be a legislator. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I literally struggled with transitioning what I thought would be transitioning from, a union member, advocate, and then to an elected official. And it wasn't until, honestly, I realized that I didn't have to transition because I knew the issues. I live these experiences every single day. And I think, to be honest, because I can't do nothing but be honest, for those who do, look to run for office one day, is that you have to have a very tight circle of people who love and support you and remind you of why you are there. And you have to know your why. Because there are folks in those spaces that will try to take you from out of that space of being an advocate. You have people that'll tell you, I've had people tell me, you're not an advocate anymore. You're an elected official. I'm always an advocate if I'm representing the people I serve. I'm beholden to them. That's why I don't take money from nursing homes, corporations, and all of those things, because I'm beholden to the people. And I'm free to do as I please because I don't owe these people who constantly oppress the people that I represent, right? And so I think that plays a big part in it, but there's no blueprint on how to legislate. It's really you having the knowledge of, what it is that needs to be done in your perspective, space of where you'll be representing, but also just trusting your base, because you have a base when you get there, but always referring back to that base is something that I personally do most of my time when I'm making decisions, because these other people that wasn't with you when you were running, they don't care about you. They all have special interests, and trust and believe me, they'll be nice to you now, but let something happen, they'll be the main ones going against you. So I keep a very close, tight space of folks who I love, and they support me. I support them, and I'm okay with telling my story. I'm okay with being vulnerable because I know that there's thousands of Lakeishas all across this country. There's nothing that anyone can say about me that I haven't already told about myself because I'm an open book. So I think having that, and that's what we all embody on this call, is what make us stronger and better elected officials. And so I would love to see more members step up into these roles because there is a big challenge, and there's a challenge inside of the General Assembly where people will say the right things when they're running or when they're asking for your support, but they'll do something differently when they're there. And so I always
And
encourage
when you
the
started
Facebook
out,
presence.
Lakeisha, there were a lot of people typing accountability, accountability. That's the point you're making. Like once people get
Yes.
into office, we have to hold them accountable, but it would be even better to have more members rise to the challenges that you've all described together. And so I'm curious as we close out how you persevere. And in the days when you're trying to make the case in the Democratic caucus, in the various legislative bodies, what gives you hope and what keeps you going? And how do you persevere through the hard times to speak on behalf of all of us?
I think for me, it's always good to know, not from a selfish or egotistical standpoint. It's always good to know that you're doing the right thing. When people ask me about who I am, I tell them, look at my voting record. As the representative said, um, it really is about when you get to the floor and have to vote that people really know where you are, because the pressures that are submitted on you from lobbyists and advocates and constituents coming at you, you got to block out all that noise. Sometimes you got to say a little prayer. You know, sometimes God's got to help you with some of this. Look up, and then you got to push the right button to do the right thing, um, so that so that you so that when later on, because those votes are recorded, so that later on when people are asking what kind of politician you are, I want to be able to say, look at my voting record, because that's the most that's the best way you can tell what your elected official is about. And the other thing is, I hear some things from my colleagues that either doesn't make sense, or they don't give it enough resources, or it's just a stupid idea. I'm pretty good at just saying I'm polite about it, but I'm pretty good at
Trust that, Reggie, that you're very polite.
letting people down, knowing that maybe this idea may be ahead of its time. And maybe we should shelve that for now, because no is just as powerful as yes. And sometimes yes can be extremely powerful if you can get something that's never been done before. That is so important, that if an issue comes up, that you can stand tall and amongst all the adversarial participants coming around you, that you know that you're doing the right thing.
Great. Thank you. William, what gives you hope?
So what keeps me going is the fact that I got to go back to the same neighborhood that I grew up in my entire life and that I've been representing my entire life. And that keeps me grounded. You know, I still hop on the bus every now and then because, you know, I want to keep that hunger and that desire going. I think that it's important to the work that I do when you can completely immerse yourself in the experiences of those you have grown up around and those who, you know, you hang out with, every now and then at the corner store. But the reality is that if we don't do the work that we're supposed to do, many families will suffer, and it's as simple as that. And I remember when I was in my first session in the legislature as an assemblyman, and my first bill was to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour in 2017. And I got a lot of people paid that session because every corporation hired lobbyists to advocate against my bill. And they should be thanking me for all the money that they made that session because they got hired because of my bill. But I introduced the bill not because it was popular, but because it was necessary. And we have to, as elected officials, do the things that are necessary. And at the end of the day, if we continue to do that, we will continue to be inspired by the number of people, the new people that get involved with the process, being that they're seeing that there's someone who is representing them. Because by far there are more people who are struggling to make ends meet today, struggling to identify if they're going to put a couple extra dollars more of gas in the car than food in the refrigerator than there are of people who are affluent and of wealth. So I take the role very seriously, and that really keeps me going. And another thing that keeps me going is the fact that if we don't continue to advance these policies, things will continue to get more and more out of balance, which means that there are going to be more and more people who don't experience a high quality of life or even have the ability to unleash their untapped potential. There isn't a shortage of men and women and those who don't identify, but there's a shortage of examples. And we have to get more examples into these positions of leadership. And leadership, to me, is only defined by two words, and that is by example. That is how leadership is defined, and that is what keeps me going. That is what I believe that we have to continue to display in our respective roles in government.
Thank you so much, William. Very inspiring. Lakeisha, will you bring us home on what gives you hope?
Yes, my children. I have 3 boys,
Of course.
17, 14, and 10. They are union babies. Okay. They bring me hope. They inspire me. When I think about when I first ran for office, I think about, the kids who were running out of their houses screaming my name. Because even while I was running, I still thought to myself that there's no way I'm going to win in a 7-way race with a family who had been in office respectfully, 30 plus years, right? I didn't see what everybody else saw around me because I always self-reflect. I always, second guess myself sometimes, but I always trust my gut instinct too, if that makes sense. But I think about that moment and I always refer back to it because I was running at a time where change was being demanded. And I knew I had what it took to run for this office. And I just needed to get to the finish line. And so being in this space now, and I'll be honest, because I'm always open and honest about how I feel, it's times where, you get burnt out. It's a mental wear and tear. But I always go back to my kids, and then that day that we won a 7-way race, 50% of the vote. I'm the first millennial young Black woman to represent this district, and the first nursing home worker, right? So though I was a threat to everyone else,
we just got to shout for that. That's
to everyone else.
Huge 7-way race.
Yes. And that's another thing about union members running in these races, right? Is that we bring people power because we know how to organize. But meditation has been one of my my number one priorities. After a long day or a session where I just felt really beat up or feel beat up about it. And though we've had a lot of victories here in Illinois, we have had a lot of victories, and that's because of leadership. That is because of the change and the narrative of how our General Assembly is, going. But I meditate and I talk to people who I trust, and vent to them. And then I remind myself of why I'm doing this work. I remember the seniors I was advocating for. I remember the workers that I had to look in their eyes and tell them that we're going to win this case for you because you didn't do anything wrong. I'll just be honest. This world discriminates against poor people. They don't like poor people. Mm-hmm. We see it through policy. We see it through the actions that have been taken decade after decade of oppressing our communities. And just being that voice here in the state of Illinois, and representing a very diverse district that is, disproportionately resourced, but now I'm trying to level out that playing. It's reminding me of the days when I was working in that nursing home. I don't know. It just does, right? Because I remember the faces, I remember the stories, and it sounds very familiar when I'm knocking on these doors, because the people I'm talking to are social workers, they're teachers, they're home care workers, child care workers, everything you could think of. We're all connected in this district. And so I can go on the north part of my district and talk to someone who owns $1 million home and say the exact same thing I'm saying to someone on the west side of Chicago, right? And bring those folks together. And I think that's what makes us unique. But that's what keeps me motivated and keep me driving forward, is the hope for a better future for the 9th District and just for our country, as a whole. It's the hope.
Right. Thank you so much to each one of you, our rock star panelists, Black elected officials who are helping us close out Black History Month and honor the incredible contributions of these incredible leaders from our union. And I just wanted to lift up what my brother, Executive Vice President Joseph Bryant, said in the comments earlier. I agree. You are all an inspiration to our membership. And I want to close with gratitude for each and every one of you, and the hope that you give me, the way in which you've walked through your fears, inspiring me to continue to walk through my own fear and challenge a system that is rigged against us in so many ways. And I think, Lakeisha, you're right, that our government, corporations are set up to diminish and shame poor people as if it was the individual responsibility of a poor person, when poverty wages by corporations reach earning record profits are at the fundamental basis for poverty wage work in this country, and that each and every one of you assume leadership in legislatures that are going to help change the world and make it a better place for the children. So thank you all for closing us out on Black History Month. Thank you to our listeners for joining us. And we want you to consider running for office too. And we want to back you, whether you're inside of SEIU or a union member outside of SEIU, or a family or friend that you heard about this Facebook Live from. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.